I am reading the Hardy Book Series, Book 1. The Tower Treasure. Frank and Joe Hardy clutched the grips of their motorcycle and stared in the horror at the oncoming car. It was careering from side to side on the narrow road. He'll hit us. We'd better climb the hillside and fast, Frank exclaimed as the boys brought the motorcycles to a screeching halt and leaped off on the double. Joe cried out as they stared on the steep embankment. To the amazement, the reckless driver suddenly pulled his car hard to the right, turned into a into turned into a side road, but it held the dust ground and sped off out of sight. "Whoa," said Joe. "Let's get away from here before the crazy guy comes back. That's a dead-end road, you know." The boys scrambled back onto the motorcycle and gunned them a bit to get past the intersecting road in a hurry. They rode in silence for a while, gazing at the scene until on their right an embankment of trembled rocks and boulders exploded speedily to the water below. From the other side From the other side rose a jagged cliff. The left the little traveled road was winding and just wide enough for two cars to pass. "Boy, I'd hate to fall off the edge of this road," Frank remarked. It was a 100-foot drop. "That's right," Joe agreed. We'd sure be smashed to bits before we even got to the bottom." Then he smiled. Watch your step, Frank, or Dad's papers won't get delivered." Frank reached into his pocket to be sure. Several important legitimate papers which he was to deliver to Mr. Hardy were still there. Relieved to find them, Frank chuckled and said, after the help we gave on his last case. He ought he ought to set up the firm for Hardy and Sons. Why not? Joe replied with a bored grin. With a bored grin. Isn't isn't he one of the famous private detectives in the country? He country and ain't ain't we bright too? Then become serious. Be added, I wish we could solve a mystery of our own, though. Frank and Joe, students at Bayport High, were obtaining business which pleasure this Saturday morning by doing the errand of their father for their father, even though one boy was dark and the other fair. There was a marked resemblance between the two boys. 8-year-old Frank was tall and dark. Joe, a year younger, with blonde and blue eyes. They were the only children of Fenton and Lady Hardy. The family lived in and Bayport, a small but thriving city of 50,000 inhabitants, located at Bartmouth Bay, 3 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. The two motorcycles whipped around the narrow road that skirted the bay and led to Willowville, the boys' destination. The boys took the next curve neatly and started up a long, steep slope. Here the road was a mere ribbon and badly in need of repair. Once we get to the top of the hill, it won't be so rough, Frank remarked as the joints over the uneven surface. Better road for there into Willowville. Just then, above the sharp put of their own motors, the two boys heard the roar of the car approaching from their rear at great speed. They took a moment to glance back. Look like the same guy saw before. Joe burns out, "Good night, good night." Once the Hardys stopped and pulled close to the edge as they dared. Frank and Joe hopped off and stood posed and leaped out of danger if necessary. The car hustled towards them like a shot just when it seemed as if it could not miss them. driver swung the wheel with vigorous, swung the wheel about vigorously, and the sedan sped past. Woo! That was close, Frank gasped. The car has been traveling at such high speeds that the boys had been unable to get the license number or a glimpse of the driver's features, but they had noticed that he was hatless and had a stock of hair. Red hair. If I ever meet him again, Joe muttered, I'll. The boy was too excited to finish the threat. Frank relaxed. He must be practicing for some kind of race, he remarked. And as the dark blue sedan disappeared from sight around the curve ahead, the boys resumed their journey. By the time they rounded the corner and could see Willowville in a valley along the bay beneath them, there was no trace of the rash motorist. He's probably half away across the state by this time, Joe remarked. Unless he's in jail or over a cliff, Frank added. The boys remarked. Willowville and Frank delivered the legit papers to a lawyer while Joe regarded the motorcycles. When his brother returned, Joe suggested, how about taking the other road back to Bayport? I don't crave going over the bumpy stretch again. Suits me. When we can stop off at Chet's Mortar, who was a school chum of the Hardy boys, lived on a farm about a mile out of Bayport. The pride of Chet's life was a bright yellow jalopy which he named Queen. He worked on it daily to soup up the engine. Yeah. Frank and Joe retraced the trip of a few miles. They turned onto a country road which led to the highway on which the Mortown farm was situated. As they neared Chet's home, Frank suddenly brought his motorcycle to a stop and peered down into a clump of bushes into a deep ditch at the side of the road. Joe, the crazy driver, or somebody else had cracked up among the tall bushes on overturned overturned blue sedan. The car was a total wreck and lay wheels upwards as a mass of tangled junk. We'd better see if there's anyone underneath, Joe cried out. The boys made their way down the covert. The boys down their way, made their way down the covert, their hearts pounding. What would they find? As close look into the sedan and in the immediate vicinity provided there was no victim around. Maybe this happened some time ago, said Joe, and Frank stepped forward and laid his head on the exposed engine. Joe, it's still warm, he said. The accident occurred a short while ago now. I'm sure this is the red-headed driver's car, but what about him? Joe asked. Is he alive? Did somebody rescue him, or what happened? Frank shrugged. One thing I can tell you, I, uh, either he or somebody else removed the license plate to avoid identification. The boys were completely puzzled by the whole affair, since the assistance was not needed at the spot. They climbed up of the covert and back onto their motorcycles. Before long they were in sight of the Morton's home, as rambling old farmhouse with an orchard at the rear. When they dove up the lane, they saw Choot at the barnyard gate. Hey fella, Joe called. Chet hurried down the hill, down the lane to meet them. He was a plump boy who loved to eat, who was rarely without an apple or a pocket of cookies. His round, freckled face usually wore a smile, but the Hardys sensed something was wrong. As they brought the motorcycles to a stop, they noticed that Chum's cherry expression was missing. What's the matter? Frank asked. I'm in trouble, Chet cries. You're just in time to help me. Did you meet a fellow driver, the Queen? Frank and Joe looked at each other barely. Your car? No, we haven't seen it, said Joe. What happened? It's been stolen. Stolen, you said. Stolen, yes. I just came out of the garage to get the Queen, and she was gone, Chet answered, more, more, mournfully. Wasn't the car locked? That was the strange part. It was locked. Although the garage was open, I can see how anyone got away with it. A professional job, Frank commented. Auto thefts always carry scores of keys when with them. Chet has no I Chet, have you any idea what this what have any idea when this happened? Not no one no more than 15 minutes ago, because there was that's when I came home with the car. We're wasting time, Joe cried out. That let's chase the thief. Chase that thief. But I don't know which way he went, Chet protested. We didn't meet him, so he must have gone in the other direction, Frank reasoned. Climb on behind me, Chet, Joe urged. The Queen can't go as fast as our motorcycles. We'll catch him in no time. And there was only a little gas in the car anyway, Chet exclaimed as he swung himself onto Joe's motorcycle. Maybe it has stalled by this time. In a few moments, the boys were tearing down the road in pursuit of the automobile thief. End of chapter 1. Don't forget to like and subscribe.